It all must be packed by sundown.
I do not understand why you must
Do
go.
you see my blue scarf?
There is no food here. We must
There's
go
nothing for us.
Don't listen to your tattered edge and never forget where you must always remember your love who you were and where you came from.
Leave me, get out of my sight!
Hi, I'm Abigail Ayulo, and I wrote a play adaptation of the Book of Ruth from the Hebrew Bible. It has an evolving title. When I submitted to the Symposium, it was called Pilgrims Far From Home to allude to the themes of belonging, but has more recently adopted the name of My Blue Scarf, paying homage to the central symbol in the play. The play tells the story of the Book of Ruth and is written in the style of Hebrew verse. It is currently unfinished and consists of a compilation of 8 completed scenes bridged by stage directions. So far, I have had 1 table read and am in the process of finishing the script. The play works to give a refreshing and realistic take on Ruth's life by focusing on female relationships and the gritty reality of what it means to be marginalized. Some history. According to the lineages recorded in the Bible, Ruth lived around 1300 BC in ancient Moab and Bethlehem, modern-day Jordan and Israel. Here are some images of the setting. The image on the left depicts the ancient tribe of Judah and the kingdom of Moab. The red line shows the route Ruth, a Moabite, would have taken on her journey to Bethlehem. The image on the right shows what this looks like in modern-day Israel and Jordan. To structure the plot of my play, I referenced the story as described in the Bible, as well as cultural implications of the story recorded in the Ruth Rabbah, which is a collection of cultural interpretations of various rabbi through the centuries, first recorded in the 13th century AD. To my knowledge, this narrative is mentioned briefly by certain Muslim prophets, but does not exist in any other holy text. For those who are not familiar with the story of Ruth, let me outline the basic plot. There was a family, Naomi, Elimelech, and their 2 sons, who lived in Bethlehem. But a famine hit, and the family moved to Moab, where there was food. There, the 2 sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Soon after, all the men in the family died. Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem, and Ruth followed her, while Orpah stayed behind in Moab. Back in Bethlehem, Ruth discovers that her employer, a man named Boaz, is her kinsman redeemer, meaning he is related to her father-in-law and legally is able to save her and Naomi from destitution by marrying the widowed Ruth. In the middle of the night, Ruth goes to Boaz and tells him he should marry her, thus saving her and her family. After a series of complications and negotiations, Boaz and Ruth are married, and have a baby boy who is the grandfather of the famous David from the story of David and Goliath. I first had the idea of adapting this story while I was sitting in a church service listening to yet another retelling of Ruth. But this was the 3rd or 4th time I had heard mention of Ruth in the last month or so. I've come to realize that as a writer, when a story or particular themes keep coming up in my life, it means I have to do something creative with them. It becomes material. Here are my notes from the Ruth series we were going through. You can see here where I had the idea of turning it into a play. It occurred to me as the pastor was talking about how Ruth's actions to approach Boaz in the middle of the night were lined with sexual undertones. Ruth put herself in danger's way to demand salvation for her family, taking bold initiation and agency over her and Naomi's future. She would have found Boaz at the threshing floor, where the men stored the beaten barley after the harvest. There would have been hired prostitutes and excess drinking to celebrate the end of the harvest season. The men slept at the threshing floor to guard the crops. This is the danger into which Ruth walks to demand redemption. It is a story that is too R-rated for children to hear, yet I was first told this story sometime in preschool. Hearing Ruth's story in a new light, stripped of the sanitized Sunday school version, I was creatively inspired. So, I was sitting in church, taking notes on Ruth's racy schemes and bold actions, when an image popped into my head. A bare stage washed in purple light, with the 2 figures, Boaz and Ruth, huddled together downstage right. I knew then I had to write this script. More than just telling a story that intrigued me, my purpose for writing this script lay in trying to provide more opportunities for marginalized people involved in theater and using heightened language outside the Western verse form to tell these stories. Plays like Hamilton have contributed incredible strides towards racial representation on the stage. but I recently discovered that in a survey by the Asian American Performers Action Coalition, done for the 2016 to 2017 Broadway season, 66% of roles were occupied by people who were Caucasian, 18% were African American, 7% were Asian American, 5% were Latinx, and only 1.7% of roles were occupied by people of Middle Eastern or North African descent. Now, I am a white woman, and I was nervous to write a story from a culture that I do not belong to. But as a playwright, I want to tell stories that provide opportunities to learn from and engage with people who are unlike me, because that's how we grow. I wanted this play to be a production where minorities can dominate the stage, because the story of Ruth is a story of a marginalized woman who finds love and belonging in the relationships she forms with the women in her life. Once a finished draft of the play is completed, I hope to give it to readers, actors, designers, scholars, and other people belonging to various walks of life, but especially Middle Eastern and Jewish women, to hear their insights on the story. I want to make sure that it is true to the nature of the story's origins. I want to be sure that I am accurately representing the lives of women like Ruth on the stage. My other goal for this project is to tell the story using the verse form belonging to the story's origins. Ruth was originally written in Hebrew, though it was not originally written in verse. I love reading Shakespeare and wanted to style this play in a similar heightened language. Shakespeare, however, comes from a Western poetic tradition. My aim was to write Ruth modeling its Hebrew poetic tradition. One of the actors at my table read responded that the text felt like it was translated from another language. He asked if I had taken anything verbatim from the original text. Actually, very few phrases in the script are taken directly from the original text. The reason it sounds like it is translated is because I emulated the sound of Hebrew poetry in English found in places like the Psalms. The main feature of Hebrew poetry is parallelism, which I will explain later. But for the sound, the lines of poetry usually contain between 2 to 5 beats, with usually no more than 7 beats per line. For example, in Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing." 4. He makes me lie down in green pastures. 3. He leads me beside quiet waters. 3. He refreshes my soul. 2. An example from my play will be spoken by Taylor Hudson, playing Ruth in Scene 2.
I curse this place with my sick, sweet breath. I breathe half-truths to a little girl, and what does that make me? Orpah, sister, I wish you could be here.
The bolded words represent the stressed beats within each line. Each line, as Taylor reads them, contain 3 to 4 beats, which is typical of translated Hebrew verse. The biggest challenge with the language, however, was emulating the parallelism, which is the central feature of Hebrew poetry. There are 5 kinds of parallelism used in Hebrew verse: synonymous, synthetic, emblematic, climactic, and antithetical. The first kind, synonymous parallelism, is the most similar to how we use parallelism in English, and is characterized by saying the same thing in 2 consecutive lines. It is used for emphasis. I use it here to emphasize the heightened and flustered emotions Yadira feels in Scene 12. Notice how this affects how Chaney Holland plays Yadira in these lines.
I am betrothed to a man, my parents' friend. He is a good man, a rich man, a well-off and kind man, but I am young and new to men. I have been hidden away like prized jewels that have never glinted in the sun.
In this example from the same scene, Yadira's lines contain examples of both synthetic and emblematic parallelism. Synthetic parallelism occurs when the poet is continuing the line by giving more information for the reader. For example, in the second line, Yadira says that she is hidden away, which explains why she is new to men. Emblematic parallelism uses symbols to reinforce what the poet means to say. Notice how Yadira compares herself to jewels throughout the 3 lines, which reinforces not only how she is inexperienced, but serves to reveal how highly she values women within male-female relationships. Climactic parallelism is not a form common in my play, but it primarily uses repetition to build tension and emotion and make a point. Orpah's lines will be read by Chaney Holland.
Where was kindness in my life? Where was kindness in my marriage? Was kindness in these scars? Is there kindness in this tomb? Do not leave. Stay with me here in Moab. We will return to court. We will remarry.
Notice how Chaney's urgency increases as the lines progressed, and how each repetition of kindness, paired with the increasingly intense nouns that follow, life, marriage, scars, and tomb, build to the climax, which is her point, stay. This is followed by a denouement, which explains her plan if the listener does stay. Finally, antithetical parallelism works to emphasize using opposites. In my play, Ruth uses antithetical parallelism to emphasize why she must return to her late husband's homeland. Notice how Ruth makes her point convincing through contrast as Taylor Hudson speaks the lines.
I cannot follow Mahlon to where he lies beyond the grave, so I will follow Naomi to her home beyond the desert.
Experimenting with an unfamiliar verse form proved a bigger challenge than I had anticipated, but I am excited to continue work on the project. I intend to finish the play by the end of the year. Once completed, I hope to reach out to various groups, including women belonging to underrepresented populations, to get feedback on the finished text. After many rounds of revision, I hope to submit the finished play to workshops and playhouses throughout the country. I believe that this story is needed today to show us how to lift each other up, to live with hope, and make each other better. I would like to finish by showing Naomi's closing monologue performed by Jayne Hubbard. Thank you.
What is this, child, that I deserved to feel again? I thought that joy was washed from my life, like the dust from my feet at a threshold. But here we are, caked again in dusty love, rough and unpolished from years of neglect. Sorry, baby, if I hold you too tight or swing you too roughly. It's not in Mara's nature to smile at innocence, no. It is Mara's way to shine experience unto innocent eyes. Blind them with the truth, I say. It's better to know than be swept off without expectation and cleaned out against one's will. But here you are, little one, little Obed, in the arms of Naomi. Let our names restore us, for through the same woman were both of our names given back to us. Sleep now, little Obed. Little act of worship, great act of love.